So just before we start, just wanted to let you know that Venkat does have a couple of problems with his video, with his broadband at some points in the interview, but please don't let it put you off. He's such a brilliant and experienced Amazonian. His words are golden. So please hang around, enjoy the video. Ooh. So hey Venkat, how you doing?
I'm good, Gail. How are you?
I'm really well, thank you. How's the weather over there in Seattle?
It's cloudy today, which is, what it is in Seattle for like 8 months of the year. But the next couple of weeks look good. It'll probably be about, 8 to 12 degrees Celsius. So looking forward to, going out in the evenings for a walk. It is the cherry blossom time of the year.
Oh, beautiful.
And about, where I live in Seattle, we're about 3 miles from the University of Washington, which is where there's an entire quad that has cherry blossoms, and my wife and I are planning to go there sometime during the weekdays, early mornings.
Nice. I've heard all about that, but I've never made it. So if anybody who's listening is in Seattle, that's the place to go for a trip in the springtime.
Yes, it is. I think it'll be really nice for the next 2 or 3 weeks over there.
Lovely. Well, let's get going then. So thank you. Thank you for joining us and being willing to share your story about your kind of journey to and through the Amazon interview process. So thank you for joining. So I guess just could you set us up, please, and just talk to us about what you do at the moment, and then I'll ask you to take us back in a little bit of time, because obviously you've been at Amazon for a little while now, but just tell us, what do you do? How does it work?
So I currently lead a product team at Amazon. It's a part of a greenfield initiative. So something that's really 0 to 1, not something that I can talk about on the interview. But it's prior to this role, I was leading a product and a data science team within an advertising team within Amazon. And prior to that, I joined as the second product manager on the customer engagement team within our streaming video business. So,
of course, that's when we met, right? That was where we crossed paths. Yeah,
that is right.
Yeah. Fun times. We'll talk about that a little bit more later, because I'd love to talk to you about that role and some of the skills and key leadership principles and how great it was working with you. So we can talk about that a little bit later. But sure. Take us back in time. What were you doing before you joined Amazon? What was the role that led you to Amazon?
So before I joined Amazon, I was actually at business school. So I'll walk you through a bit of my journey pre-Amazon. So I'm a chemical engineer. I did my undergrad back in India.
I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, this was way back in between 2006 2010. Did my undergrad in chemical engineering in Mumbai in India. I then spent about 4 years working at one of India's largest CPG companies. And that's the role where I kind of, I got to apply parts of my chemical engineering background. So I did different roles within the company, spent a year in manufacturing where I was leading production for a soap manufacturing plant in the northern part of India. So got to apply some of my chemical engineering skills, but also got to learn a bunch of management skills along the way. So, was managing a plant with about 140 employees overall, producing different types of soaps, solid soaps, liquid soaps, and so on. I realized I wanted to get kind of more closer to the business side of things. And so I moved to the head office of that company, and I did product development for what we called as the personal wash category. And so I was a product manager, actually, building formulations of soaps and shower gels for customers in India, and that's the role that kind of really got me super excited about product management overall. The thing that I love the most about the role is the ability to interact with almost every single team within the company. And so when you're building a product, and this was again like building soaps, so doing customer research, trying to understand what type of what are the qualities in a soap that customers value the most, then working with the R&D team to build the product out, and then test it out with customers. And I did a bunch of interesting stuff with fragrances and different colors and different like even lots of different formulations within soaps, soaps that work well in humid parts of India, soaps that work well when the weather is much more colder, and so on. So it's a fun role, and that kind of is why I'm really passionate about product management. And then I did that for a couple of years. I then did a stint in that same company where I was directly reporting to the CEO and working on kind of marketing and other sort of strategic initiatives within the company. And that's when I realized it's time to actually get a formal education in business. I applied to business school. I ended up coming to Wharton in Philadelphia. And during my 2 years at business school, I interned at Amazon in the summer of my first year and loved my experience, and then joined back for full time in 2016.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about your internship then, Kat, because obviously internships are huge, probably even more so now than they've ever been before. So tell us about your internship. What kind of projects did you get to do? Like what you said you loved it. So what did you love so much about it?
The part that I really loved about my internship was, so I interned on a team that used to be called Amazon Destinations. And, we were trying to, build a travel product for our customers. And my internship was basically about trying to figure out what are the unique pain points that customers still have within the travel vertical. And by customers, this is our end customers, as well as hotels, which are also kind of the other part of the marketplace in some way. And so in that internship, Amazon was in sort of its early days of trying to figure out whether we should get into that business or not. And in my 12 weeks of the internship, I ended up writing what at Amazon is called a PR FAQ, a press release of trying to address a critical customer need, and then also working with a few hotels in Seattle where we did a pilot, and also working with engineering to kind of design the high level tech architecture of the product, if we were to go ahead and invest in it. And it was overall the Amazon Destinations team was a relatively small team. And I, again, similar to my experience back in India, I love the fact that I could, interact with the sales team, the marketing team, the engineering team, the customer research team, come up with a product proposal, actually run a pilot. I spent about a couple of weeks actually going to different hotels in Seattle, where we were kind of executing the pilot and getting real customer feedback. And the pace at which we were able to execute on this project, even though I was an intern, was something that I was really impressed with. And I was blown away by the fact that Amazon, which even back then was quite a big company, could execute at such a fast pace. And that's basically what got me to say yes to Amazon for full time.
Awesome. So just help me understand, because a lot of the candidates and the people that are going to be listening to this video, they're going to be coming through all sorts of different processes. There'll be people coming through military pathways, there'll be grads, there'll be interns, there'll be people coming through kind of the standard interview process. So as I talk to different Amazonians, I'm sure they'll all have slightly different experiences of the interview process. So can you just talk us through what your particular experience was with the interview process, from application all the way through to when you got a fantastic call from that recruiter to say, yay, we want to offer you a place? Can you just talk us through it?
Yeah. Mine was my process was a bit more kind of formalized, given that I was at school, and so I went through the university recruiting process. And so in my first year at business school, Amazon ended up coming to campus in around, I think, October or November, and there were a bunch of representatives from Amazon from different job families, product management, category management within retail, the pathways operation program, program management roles, and the finance program, which were the 5 roles that Amazon used to hire from business school back in 2015, 2016. And so that process gave me a really good view of what are the different roles Amazon hires for out of business school. There were a couple that really interested me the most. One was the product management role, and the other was the retail leadership development program role. And those were the 2 roles that I decided to apply for. And the application process was fairly straightforward. To upload your resume. No cover letter or anything required. And then once I think the first week of Jan is when we ended up uploading our resumes. Amazon shortlisted me for both those roles, within like 10 days or so. And then end of Jan is when the interviews happened. And the day after the interviews for both of those roles, I had to go through 4 interviews each. There was a first round and a second round. There were 2 interviews in the first round and then another 2 interviews in the second round. And for both those roles, Amazon got back to me, I think, within like a day of the interviews completing. So it was a really quick turnaround process overall.
Yeah, the MBA process, I've bar raised on it a few times, and it's pretty intense, both for the candidates and actually the interviewers on the other side. So. Yep. Talk to us about how you prepared, because obviously most of the candidates watching this will understand the importance of the leadership principles and how fundamental that is to Amazon. But different people can do different things for their preparation and different levels of intensity and different sources. So how did you prepare? How did you get yourself ready for those 2 rounds?
Yeah. So, I'd with Amazon interviews, you obviously hear a lot about the focus on leadership principles. And so when I was speaking with second years at my school who had interned at Amazon the previous summer, they basically asked me to focus really heavily on the leadership principles. So what I ended up doing was I prepared about 8 to 10 in some ways stories about the different experiences that I had working in the CPG company back in India. And I prepared those stories, in sort of an SBI, the situation, behavior, impact format. And then, I kind of put those in an Excel and tried to kind of, map a story to get the leadership principles. Yeah. The intent of that, was to make sure that the Amazon leadership interview, behavioral questions, you wouldn't specifically be asked directly about a leadership principle. Typically a question sometimes covers a gamut of 1 or 2 leadership principles. So I really focused on the stories that I wanted to talk about from my experience and kind of made sure that across the 14 leadership principles, I had like stories, at least one story that I could speak to if I'm asked a question. And in many cases, some of my stories had components that map to different leadership principles. Yeah. And depending on the specific question, sometimes I during the preparation process, I decided, if it's like a very specific question, I need not talk about the entire story. I can talk about a part of it. But there's one specific, from something that really helped me a lot in the actual interviews was really focusing on the behaviors part of the situation behavior impact framework, because I think it really helped me convey to the interviewers what exactly I did in that situation, and kind of thinking through and a lot of this was really introspecting on my prior experience and thinking through what did I think about, who were the set of people that I spoke to, how did I eventually make the decision that I did, and I think that thinking through that piece was really helpful for me in the interviews. But even now that I'm on the other side and, when I'm involved in taking interviews for candidates for product management roles, one of the things I really look to look at is to just kind of how somebody thinks about a particular problem, and how they work, right? And talking through the details of how exactly you reacted in a particular situation, to me
So
was.
I'm so pleased you used the word details, because as an interviewer myself and also as a bar raiser, that's always what I'm looking for. And I think some of the uncertainty candidates have is how much detail they should go into. There's lots of different advice offering candidates, telling them that they should have stories that last from 1 to 2 minutes or 3 to 4 minutes. My guidance is always to candidates that you need to give the detail, because if you don't give the detail about what you said, what you thought, what you did, and even what they said and what you think they thought and what they did, it's very hard to see the behaviors. And it sounds like that's very much something that you look for too.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% agree with that. Yeah, I think the details part of it is really important. And I given that I got through both those roles during the interview process, I definitely think focusing on the specifics of what exactly did you do, and in some ways also trying to bring out like why like how did you behave in that situation that was different from like what anybody else would have done. I think bringing out the uniqueness about the way you acted in that situation, I think, is important to convey.
And just one of the other things that a lot of coaches will give the candidates advice on is mock interviews, not necessarily official mock interviews with an interview coach, but just practice in terms of delivering your examples. Was that something that you were able to focus on at school with your peer group?
Yeah, so we had, given that I was in the midst of process with different companies during kind of this internship recruiting timeframe. I ended up, there were a bunch of different seniors, that we second year students basically, with whom we sat down and kind of they helped us through the interview process. So explaining your story to somebody else and getting feedback from them, whether are you like going too long, are you talking about a few things that are not relevant, really helps you like, I don't think there's this like 1 minute or 2 minute like a very standard time frame for answer, but you need to make sure that you're not like going on and on with your answer, but at the same time making sure that you're giving enough to the interviewer so that he or she understands exactly what you did in that situation.
Excellent. It's really, really good advice. So when you went through the interview process, it's obviously you've come from school where there's lots of people who have been there before, but was there anything about the process that kind of surprised you? Even if you were expecting it, maybe it wasn't quite what you were expecting. Was there anything kind of that you maybe wish you had known beforehand, or was it all exactly as you had been told it would be?
To the most part, I think, I was, even though people had told me how, so apart from the behavioral side of the preparation, I had prepared quite a bit on the product side as well. And on the product side, what I would do I had like a cohort of my friends who were really interested in product management, and we would all kind of sit together and take a specific aspect of a product, say you look at the reviews and the comment section of the YouTube product, and we would all kind of go back and think through, if we were the PM in charge of that particular product, how would we think about the next 12 to 18 months roadmap? I'd spend a fair amount of time overall in kind of putting myself into the shoes of a PM and trying to think through what I would do if I were in charge of that product. And the Amazon interview process, I thought the focus overall on the product side of the house was much lesser than what I had expected. And people had told me that Amazon's really focused on the behavioral interviews and the leadership principles. Even compared to what I expected, I felt the focus on the leadership principles was significantly more than what I thought it would be. So I think out of the 4 interviews, there were a couple of them that went deeper onto the product side of things, but there were a couple of interviews that were primarily focused on the leadership principles, and even in the other two interviews where we discussed about product, I'd say about 50% of those were focused on leadership principles as well. So in short, the focus on the LP side of the leadership principles was a lot higher than even what I was expecting.
Yeah, I get that question a lot, actually. People tend to ask me whether there's some kind of mathematical weighting between the technical questions that they'll get and the leadership principles. And my guidance is always to people, no, but the leadership principles are everything. It doesn't matter how strong you are technically. If you're the most incredibly technically skilled person, but you don't raise the bar on leadership principles, you're not coming in. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
That is an absolutely fair assessment. And, it's also one of the reasons why, if you look at a lot of other tech companies, to get into a product management role within those companies, you probably need to have some sort of a technical or a product background to get into those roles. Amazon, on the other hand, in the intern class, I remember we were 17 of us that summer from Amazon. And I think there were like 13 or 14 of us that for whom this was the first product gig. And one of the reasons for that is the extent to which Amazon focuses on leadership principles, and not necessarily the specifics of your background. You could have worked in investment banking, you could have worked in nonprofits, you could have worked in consumer products like I did. But at the end of it, I think the Amazon leadership principles kind of tries to weave out the common thread of what really is required to be successful at Amazon, which isn't necessarily your past industry experience as such, but more to do with whichever industry you were in when you actually had a difficult problem that you were trying to solve. How did you approach that?
Yeah, and I guess that's why product management at Amazon is just such a great career opportunity. It allows you to, regardless of your background, get into an incredible organization that has product managers across its entire group. You can have a kind of a never-ending product management career in multiple different industries once you're inside Amazon.
Yeah, absolutely.
You went from travel to video, right?
Yeah. So interestingly, the team that I was interning in, Amazon ended up shutting down that team about 4 months after the internship. And by shutting down, Amazon just decided that was probably there were better initiatives to go after in terms of just the use of that resources. Again, something that I was really impressed about, because typically in large companies, decisions on not venturing into a particular new project takes years and years of back and forth. And I was really impressed at how quickly Amazon looked at some of the initial data points and kind of decided to pivot quite quickly within that space. So I ended up joining video, and a big component of that was the VP and a few of the senior leaders that I worked with during my internship. They had they were in the travel team when I had interned, and they ended up moving to Prime Video by the time I came back for my full time. So I loved working with those guys, and so I just kind of followed them when they ended up joining Prime Video.
So you've been in Amazon for a while now, so it'd be just great to hear from you. You've given us lots of info about the things that you appreciated about Amazon before you joined, and some of the things that you really enjoyed in your internship. What do you like about Amazon? What are your favorite things about working at Amazon?
There's a lot. I think the two things that I personally like the most about Amazon are the extent of ownership that you as an individual can take, as well as the ability to move really, really fast. And those are the two things that really motivate me personally. And so, whichever project that I've taken on within Amazon, I've had the complete freedom to define, what does the next 1, 3, 5 year kind of roadmap look like for that particular product. And the way Amazon reviews product plans and so on, right? Like as a PM, I write the plan, and it's not necessarily a process of approval across the leadership chain, but you review a document, people give you feedback, you take that feedback, you kind of iterate on your plan, and in that entire process, even if no matter whoever senior in the organization is giving me feedback, the expectation from that person is still for me to be in charge of the plan. And so they'll guide you along the way, but at the end of it, you make the decisions, and that's kind of super empowering. And I had that empowerment pretty much in my, like, starting from day one at Amazon, which is something that I value a lot. A second thing is just the pace at which we can execute things at Amazon. And so Amazon has the concept of what we call as 2 pizza teams internally, and this is essentially a small pod of 6 to 7 people completely dedicated on a particular problem, a customer problem that we are trying to solve, and people have a ton of autonomy in terms of making decisions and moving fast. And even though Amazon is a large company, I think there are so many areas of Amazon where we execute, even faster than what startups are able to do. And those are the 2 things that I personally like the most about Amazon. And it's not necessarily just in a product management role, but something which I think applies kind of across the board across different roles at Amazon.
Yeah, definitely. I would definitely say the same about my time in Amazon when it came to marketing. And you talked about pivoting earlier, and the decision that was made for your internship and destinations. I think that's another thing that you get very good at Amazon, which is you're all kind of heading in one direction, and then some very compelling information comes along and everybody is able to very, very quickly pivot. And I think that particularly is true of product managers and product management teams.
Yeah, absolutely. In my time within Prime Video, which is where I was for a year and a half, that was a product which was really in its kind of, I would say, 1 to 100 phase, which is essentially kind of growth. I would term it as the typical kind of growth product manager role is kind of the first role that I ventured in. And we realized that, almost every single decision that we were making, these were two-way door decisions. And so when you are in the midst of making a lot of two-way door decisions, you just have to move really fast. Because you need to have a bunch of hypotheses and you need to test those hypotheses as quickly as you can, because rather than kind of spending a ton of time and thinking about if we do this, what happens and so on, you just make sure you test out the hypothesis through an A/B test, and the results of the test will help you determine whether you should move forward in that direction or not. Yeah.
And just for anyone who's watching who doesn't know what a two-way door decision is, the two-way door decision is an incredibly strong tool, powerful tool that enables Amazon to make quick decisions. And you're effectively asking yourself, if I walk through this door, can I walk back through it? Is it a two-way door? Or if it's a one-way door, once I walk through it and it slams and I can't go backwards, that's a very different type of decision. But that concept of two-way door is really powerful because it helps Amazon to make agile decisions with a level of comfort that they can always turn back if they need to. It's a really powerful tool.
Yep, absolutely.
So Venkat, thinking about the kind of the work that you do at the moment, what would you say to anybody that's interviewing for Amazon in a PM, or you're on the technical side now, so a TPM type of role? What do you think are the critical, and we'll use leadership principles because that is the language of Amazon. What would you say are the critical leadership principles for someone who wants to do really well in that TPM/PM space?
So within the TPM PM space, I think there are two that are probably the most important. So for any sort of product management roles at Amazon, customer obsession is probably by far the number one leadership principle that you need to be good at. And whether it's through prior examples, or even when you talk about the product, if there's a product specific question that you're asked in the interview, making sure that you start from the customer first, start from understanding what type of pain points do they have within the space, and what at Amazon is called as a working backwards from the customer approach. So making sure that you apply that lens as you think about a particular problem is the most important thing within the product management job family. The second most important leadership principle in my assessment would be ownership, and really talking about from examples in the past when you have really gone above and beyond, where you had a particular people expected you to do a particular thing, but you were able to think bigger. You were able to, identify opportunities kind of by looking around corners. And, at the same time, maybe there were cases where you realize that something somewhere was broken, might not necessarily have been, fallen as like your responsibility, but, if you think something's broken, you just go and fix it. That's the way we operate at Amazon. And I kind of term all of this within the broader bucket of ownership, which is kind of going out of your way to making sure that we provide the best customer experience, even though things need not necessarily fall into kind of your domain or the specific area that people expect you to look at.
And I guess going along with that might be dive deep, certainly from my time working with you, Venkat, specifically, and why it was always such a pleasure to work with you, is just the depth of your knowledge about how the products worked. I mean, you could almost tell me anything about a product, but even beyond your own product, you were always very, very knowledgeable about how tangential kind of processes and products and teams impacted on what you were doing?
Yeah. Data is Your data is really at the crux of a lot of product roles at Amazon and across the company, right? We do end up making a lot of really data driven decisions. We obviously don't wait to the point at making sure we get 100% of the data needed to make a decision, but it's not making a decision completely in the blind. So I think Jeff in one of his yearly the shareholder letters mentioned about making a decision with roughly about 70% of the data as kind of being the sweet spot to make sure you are moving fast but not kind of boiling the ocean with regards to collecting all of the data possible. But going back to specifically as a product manager, one of the things that I've valued the most is just having a North Star set of metrics for your product. And so every day, you come to work 9 a.m. in the morning, you need to have a set of dashboards that you can open and get a really good sense of, what's happened to the product in terms of customer usage, in terms of feedback yesterday. And that kind of, is a really good way to stay really close to your product in terms of sheer metrics. So in my first product at Amazon, and we worked really closely on this Gale. This was basically a pre-roll product where we would promote originals to our customers, and this was kind of a 15 to a 30-second pre-roll slot that would show up at the beginning of any content that customers would watch on Prime Video. And when I came into the role, it was really early stage product. I think the team had spent about 6 months kind of building the infrastructure that enables us to vend out these pre-rolls. And I probably spent my first 4 or 5 months in instrumenting a set of metrics that really helped us understand if the product was actually working or not. And I had a lot of fun doing all of that, and it also ended up getting a lot of. We figured that the product actually works, and we were able to showcase that to senior leadership, which made the case for us to really go and scale the product and start thinking more along like a 3-year direction on where we want to take that. But a lot of these, especially if you're in a product where the product market fit is kind of in place, but you're now kind of in the process of scaling the product, metrics become extremely, extremely important to track and monitor.
For sure, definitely. That's a really good tip about 8 o'clock in the morning. You should be going in and looking at your metrics and seeing day by day how it's kind of progressing. I guess one of the other things that I think we learned when we were working on that particular product was we started with a set of metrics, which we thought were the right metrics. And over the course of time, with a few different experiments, we actually identified that some of the metrics that we thought were important weren't important. And I guess you need to be willing to challenge your own hypothesis on what metrics matter. And when you identify they don't matter, them, just abandon them. Don't cling on to something just because you've had it in the past. Just abandon it, move on, find new metrics. And I think that was a really big learning for us on that particular product.
Yeah, no, 100% agree with that. Yep.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you so much for giving us your time, Venkat. That was really, really interesting listening to your history. You've been at Amazon for a while now and you've done some incredible stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing all of the new stuff that you and your teams produce moving forward. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Gail. It's always a pleasure chatting with you, and really looking forward to helping out, whoever watches these videos for PM advice.
And I would definitely say anybody who happens to be lucky enough to come across a job opening in your team, they should go for it. They won't obviously know it's you from the job description, but honestly, without going too much, you are definitely one of the best product managers I ever had the privilege to work with. Your focus on customer obsession, I think, definitely stood out. We didn't talk about earns trust, but one of the little sparkles that I felt you had was how strong you were at working with teams who had a vested interest in your work. I thought your approach to earns trust was incredibly powerful. Collaboration, your projects move forward, I think, not just because of your ownership and your dive deep and your customer obsession, but also your earns trust.
Yeah, earns trust is, if we speak for a couple of hours, I'm sure we'll cover all the 14 leadership principles.
It's true.
Because I'm sure they're all important across all roles. But yeah, I do agree. Earns trust is for a product manager, especially operating across multiple different teams and multiple different geographies. That definitely becomes a really important leadership principle as well. But awesome. Likewise, Gail, for me as well, working with you, I think it was probably for a couple of years. Really enjoyed every aspect of our interaction together.
Thanks so much, Venkat. Thank you for your time. Good luck with everything moving forward. And I hope the guys that are watching this find useful insights on the TPM PM side. Thank you for being the first person to join this series of videos. I'm very grateful.
Thank you so much, Gail. You have a great rest of the day. Take care. Bye.
Now what you need to do is click on this link here and go and grab yourself one of my free Amazon Interview Wiz Academy Customer Obsession Masterclasses. Watch that and you will nail every single customer obsession question asked of you at your Amazon interview. Or if you'd like to do that later, check out this video here for more great Amazon interview bar raiser tips on interview strategy.